Hello and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest. October 16th, 2025, the Trump Ends the Gaza War edition. I am David Plotz of CityCast here in Washington, D.C., where we've had loads of technical difficulties
we haven't.
this morning.
It's all been smooth, running on rails. It's fine. After 20 years, we're doing just fine.
Okay.
John Dickerson, co-anchor of CBS News in New York City, he's been in some kind of microphone hell this morning. Where she is can only be heaven. Emily Bazelon in New Haven, which is not really heaven, but it's pretty nice. Of the New York Times Magazine and Yale University Law. Is it heaven or is it nice?
It's just nice. Hi, guys.
Did they find who owned those dogs, Emily?
I don't think so. I don't know. I
what
lost track
what
of
are you
that
talking
story.
about?
My chatter last
There was
week. about
Emily
the
had
lost
this.
dogs. Let's not
her
go down
chatter
this
about-
road.
Okay. This week on the Gabfest, is the war in Gaza over? Does Trump deserve credit for resolving it? We're going to talk to longtime Middle East expert and negotiator Rob Malley about what comes next. Then Trump is using the shutdown to punish Democrats. Who's going to fold first, Democrats or Republicans? Then the Supreme Court is getting ready to strike down basically the last standing pillar of the Voting Rights Act. Is it going to cost Democrats a dozen or more House seats in the South? Plus, we're going to have cocktail chatter and a reminder that we are coming live to 3 cities for our 20th anniversary tour. We're going to be in Chicago on October 29th, and there's still some tickets available at slate.com/Gabfest Live Chicago. We're going to be in New York in December and in DC early in 2026. We'll have those dates announced soon. There are special VIP receptions at every event. A great sort of cocktail hour, really fun. And the shows are great. They are, well, I'm not allowed to say that, but they are pretty great. They're really enjoyable. And we love doing them.
Wait, why are you not allowed to say that?
So please.
Well, because it's like we're saying our own
You can't
shows
brag
are great.
on yourself.
They're great.
Yeah.
We have an excellent time,
handsome.
and we're really excited. How about that?
Yes. Thank you, Emily. So you can get details on the tour overall at slate.com/Gabfest Live and get tickets to Chicago at slate.com/Gabfest Live Chicago. Can't wait to see you in those cities. It's been 20 years. What a great 20 years.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
We're joined by Rob Malley, who held key Middle Eastern policy roles in several administrations. He's also the author with Hussein Agha of Tomorrow is Yesterday, a book about the Middle East and
The Israel-Palestine conflict.
So, Rob, in an op-ed in The Guardian, you and Hussein Agha, in fact, wrote recently, Israel has seldom enjoyed such unrivaled regional military dominance and has never been more isolated. The Palestinians have rarely benefited from such widespread support, and their national movement has hardly ever been more adrift. Neither side managed to convert the tremendous assets they accumulated into tangible political gains. So in the wake of this Gaza settlement, or I don't know exactly what to call it, what do you mean by this? What is this paragraph tell us about how the aftermath of this settlement is going to unfold?
It means that both sides are in a very paradoxical situation where they have tremendous assets. I mean, Israel has managed to show that through its military prowess, it could dominate virtually any enemy, far and near, potential or real, for a long time to come, just through its military might. But at the same time, it really coincides with a time where Israel is more isolated, where it has greater hostility generated against it around the world. It's associated also with the rise of anti-Semitism. Those are separate but not completely unrelated phenomena. And where it faces, again, sort of wall-to-wall opposition. You see it on streets in Europe. You see it on the campuses in the US. You see it in the global South. So there's a huge gap between those, the huge asset and huge weakness. On the Palestinian side, it's kind of the reverse, if you will, where rarely in our collective lifetimes have we seen the Palestinian movement enjoy, or the Palestinian cause enjoy, this kind of international support. Again, the reverse image of what I just said about Israel. And the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian, the political aspirations have rarely been in such bad shape. I mean, what is their horizon now? Whatever we call what's happening in Gaza, they're going to be treated as sort of refugees twice or three times over. The West Bank, there's not only no Palestinian leadership, but it's being eaten up by Israeli settlers day by day. So you have these two situations of paradoxical strength and weakness. And as we say, it took President Trump, and I don't even know, day to day we could talk about how promising or not what he just achieved in Gaza is, but it took his hand to try to get those gaps to translate into some kind of truce again for however long it will last.
I mean, it seems important to have some moment of being able to celebrate the return of the Israeli hostages, the return of 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, most of whom had been detained as a result of or in connection with the war in Gaza, and just the end of, or at least hopefully the end of Israeli military action in Gaza. And yet, I mean, I feel like I desperately want all of the emotion and joy of that moment, which was like went, deep and had a lot of passion on both sides, to translate into something that is more stable and medium to long term. It just is really hard for me to see how that's going to happen, because it seems like the underlying conditions of the conflict are all still there. I mean, I guess one thing that does seem different and important is that the Israeli public has been, wrestling with this war, which went on for 2 years, a long time. 1,000 Israeli soldiers have died. And one imagines that with the return of the hostages, that public support would really weaken further in Israel for continued conflict. And so at least in Gaza, that could help fuel efforts toward peace. But I don't know, Rob, what could actually happen that could sustain some kind of progress toward, more autonomy for Palestinians, more security and safety for Israelis, especially given the leadership vacuum you're talking about on the Palestinian side. And then, of course, like the travails of Netanyahu and his right-wing government.
Yeah, I mean, so your confusion, I think, is shared, or your uncertainty is shared by everyone. I'm not sure that celebration is the right word. I think it's relief. I'm sure for some people it's celebration, but it's relief. And I mean, even for the families that are welcoming the hostages, prisoners back, the shape that they're in, the sort of the mental, physical conditions they're in, and of course the situation in Gaza, which is horrendous. Even though, even if the slaughter ends, looks like the whole place has been bombed several times. And in terms of where it goes, I mean, I've had a mix of thoughts. I can't keep a thought straight for more than a few minutes, partly because of different pronouncements from the president himself. I mean, one day it's peace for the first time we have peace in 3,000 years. The next day he says that, if Hamas doesn't quickly disarm, which I don't think they will, he could give license to Israel to resume its war. The next day he speaks, or the same day at a different hour, he speaks positively about Hamas, understands why they might not disarm right away, understands why they're even killing people, collaborators or others. So I don't know whether, he's going to remain interested in this, and which part of his instincts, which is either, we're going to have to plunge into this and resolve it in a more sustainable way. It won't be peace, but at least a lasting ceasefire, or whether, because things don't quite work out according to plan, and they won't, that I could guarantee, he says, if Israel wants to continue some of its attacks, that's fine, and we'll turn to other things. So, it's much better than the alternative. This is much better than to have the slaughter continued, prisoners and hostages still being detained, and humanitarian aid not coming in. So compared to what was the alternative, what was there prior, this is much, much better. Where this ends up, I mean, one could easily imagine that it ends up with Gaza still, half of Gaza occupied by Israeli troops, Palestinians living in wretched conditions, and the Palestinian case being treated as a humanitarian issue, where, let's try to get as much food and aid in, and as a security issue from Israel, let's deal with it the way we deal with Palestinians in the West Bank, which is whenever we see a threat, again, of any kind, and even if it's imaginary, we will shoot. And we know that some Gazans have already been killed even since the truce was announced. So again, that's an outcome that is terrible, but there's terrible and terrible. And this terrible may be better than the terrible they were suffering through for the last 2 years.
Rob, can you help me understand what role President Trump played, given what you just described? There was some of that behavior over the last, year from him. Where was he key in getting to the result we have so far? Where was it basically external forces that brought this about, as a way to kind of try to understand how we should evaluate his behavior and what leverage he has, if any, in these next stages going forward?
So, I'd say two contrasting things. First, the war would not have been as brutal, as savage as it's been over the last several months, were it not for President Trump, who gave full license to the Israeli government to wage the war, to use famine as an instrument of war, even more than they had before, basically giving them carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. So that's one side. The other side is I don't think it would have ended, assuming it has ended, without his intervention. And his intervention was several-fold. Number one, I think when he tells Prime Minister Netanyahu, you stop, Netanyahu listens in a way that he didn't listen to President Biden. He didn't listen to other American presidents because of who Trump is, his unpredictability, his whatever, however you want to describe it. He could put pressure even without even spelling out consequences. I think it was enough for the prime minister to know that President Trump was impatient. Secondly, he worked closely with countries that he feels he wants to be close to, and they certainly feel they want to be close to him, Turkey and Qatar, that had very close relations with Hamas. So the negotiation was really between the U.S., Qatar, and Turkey, and then the U.S. representing Israel, if you will, but also being able to deliver and pressure Israel, and Turkey and Qatar representing Hamas and being able to pressure and deliver Hamas. I think that's what made the difference. The last thing that may have made a difference, again, it's in contrast to every president that came before Trump, is that he's prepared to break taboos, such as talking to Hamas. It is extraordinary how we went from a position where, and I tell the story in the book, it's not to talk about me, but it is true that I was kicked out of the first Obama presidential campaign because as a private citizen working for a conflict resolution group, I had spoken and met with Hamas, entirely as a private citizen, always briefing the then Bush administration about what I was doing. Fast forward to today, where Trump not only, he has Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meeting with a Hamas leader that only a few days earlier Israel had tried to assassinate, but speaking about them sort of as the legitimate interlocutor. It's extraordinary. I think it's belated, because if you want to make peace between two conflicting parties, you got to talk to both, I would think, even if you may judge the two very differently, whatever you want to do, but you need to talk to them. And that's something that none of Trump's predecessors did. And that kind of assurance, I think that was delivered to Hamas may have helped them decide, you know what, we got Turkey, we got Qatar, and we also have an American president who's prepared to talk to us.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
Rob, continuing that question, one thing that I've been puzzling about, so you had the optics at Sharm el-Sheikh with this, you had one aging Palestinian official kind of standing there.
Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority.
You have Hamas, which is a United States and Israel considered to be a terrorist organization, although, as you say, Trump has been willing to talk to them. Where is the potential for leadership of the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian people? Where can it come from? Does the Palestinian Authority have any possibility of doing this? Can Hamas do it? Is there some other force we don't know about that could emerge, some other person, some other organization? Or is that because it seems to me it's going to be really hard for there to be any kind of stability if there isn't some sort of organizational leadership.
You're absolutely right. And if we go back, I think it's a terrible situation for the Palestinians, which is partly self-inflicted. The division between Hamas and Fatah, the other branch of the Palestinian National Movement, the fact that there haven't been elections since 2006, all of that is something that the Palestinians have to account for. But it was mightily aided and exacerbated by outside countries, particularly European and America, that decided that they were going to make sure that there were no Palestinian elections, that the division was going to be entrenched. Of course, Israel played a huge role as well. So I think there was sort of a conspiracy between a whole host of parties to make sure that the Palestinians were weak, divided, and leaderless. Now, it comes to your question, where will the leadership come from? Again, among the paradoxes of the Palestinian condition as you say, the party that was represented at Sharm el-Sheikh, the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, in the person of Mahmoud Abbas, had nothing to do with the war, had nothing to do to bring it to an end, and had nothing to do with the negotiation of the peace plan, the 20-point peace plan of President Trump. But why was he there? Because that is still the repository of international legitimacy. When the rest of the world wants a Palestinian address, that's who they go to, even though he has, as I say, no ability to change anything on the ground, no legitimacy among his own people, no electoral legitimacy, because his tenure and that of his government is long overdue, past its due date. But he's the person and he's the address. On the other hand, you have Hamas, which, yes, it's taken huge blows and is not the organization that it was 2 years ago, but it's still the one that has the presence on the ground. It's still the interlocutor, not just for Trump, but for anyone who wants to talk about war or peace. So it still has that asset, but it is shunned. Even though the president may have opened the door to talking to Hamas, they still are a designated terrorist organization in much of Europe and the US. They're not the address that the international community is going to look for. And in fact, the plan says that Hamas will play no role in governance. I doubt they'll be able to participate in the next Palestinian elections, which are due to take place in 2026. So where does the Palestinian movement go? They obviously need a third way, or not, that's not the right expression, but they need some way to unify their ranks, reinvent their politics. It's going to take a lot of effort on their part because the divisions are deep, but it's also going to take discipline on the part of outsiders who this time shouldn't stand in the way of efforts by the Palestinians to come together, unify their movement, adopt a program, adopt a strategy, and select a leadership that they feel represents them in a way that Fatah doesn't represent them, and I believe Hamas doesn't represent them either.
One of the things I took from your book, Tomorrow is Yesterday, which I really recommend, is the importance of other players in the Arab world. So you brought up Turkey and Qatar. In this context, you could also talk about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, which is right next door, and Egypt. How do you see those different world leaders and countries playing a role going forward? One of the decisions in the 1990s was to make this a more bilateral process between Israel and Palestinians, which created this power imbalance, right? Since the Palestinians have always had less power. When you bring in the rest of the Arab world, if you could do that in a way that evens the stakes, gives Israelis a greater incentive, especially economically, to think of helping to solve the Palestinian question in a way that would change their status with all their neighbors. That just seems like a different calculus to me, but also it's difficult to include all these other players. How do you see the role of those other actors in the region going forward?
So I think you depicted the situation exactly right. That's why we called it Tomorrow's Yesterday, because we're back to the era prior to the sort of mid-1960s when the Palestinian National Movement emerges and Yasser Arafat becomes the chairman, and then there is a Palestinian address. And then, as you say, in the 90s, for reasons, Israel wanted to have a weaker interlocutor and the Palestinians wanted to be more sort of independent. And so it became bilateral talks, which only accentuated the power imbalance. But for the longest time, this was an Arab-Israeli conflict where the Arabs represented the Palestinians. And in some ways, we're back there because of what, I was just talking to David about, which is the complete vanishing of the Palestinian leadership. So if there's going to be any progress now in terms of official talks, anything official, it's going to have to be through, or at least largely through, Arab Muslim countries, if you want to include Turkey, because they're the only ones who could really, at this point, who have the leverage and the ability to speak with others about the Palestinians. Now, in some ways that was, it wasn't what the Abraham Accords were supposed to be about, right? I mean, the Abraham Accords, in fact, were a way to circumvent, if you will, the Palestinian problem. But there may be a way now, and maybe the Arab countries and Gulf countries in particular have come to the realization that if they don't deal with the Palestinian problem, it's going to explode in everyone's face, including in their own domestic politics. I mean, if you're in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, anywhere, you know that the population, which every day on social media and Al Jazeera is seeing images of atrocities in Gaza, they're going to demand of their leaders to do something. And so if there is any hope for normalization between Saudi Arabia or any other country and Israel, I suspect that right now, for the foreseeable future, the Palestinian question is going to figure much more prominently than it figured when the UAE, Bahrain, or Morocco did their deals. And, I think that would be something, if I were Palestinian, I would hope that these Arab countries that have leverage, not just with Israel, in fact, not so much with Israel. It doesn't seem to me that the Israeli political class is that desperate for normalization. President Trump seems to think if he could get a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel, that would be another feather in his cap, maybe another step on his march towards a Nobel Peace Prize. So, the Saudis could tell the president, we need something much more serious on the Palestinian track, whether it has to do with Gaza, settlements in the West Bank, even broader possibility of Palestinian self-determination. But that at this point may be the best hope that the Palestinians have, unless and until they could really develop their own agency through a leadership that would step in the way that the current leadership simply is not in a position to do.
Rob Malley is the author of Tomorrow is Yesterday. Rob, thanks for coming on the Gabfest.
Thanks for having me.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Quince. As the weather cools, and boy, it turned cool here in Washington today, it's time to swap in transitional layers that actually get the job done. If you're looking for wardrobe essentials that are warm, durable, and built to last, Quince delivers. And they're delivering for me today. I'm wearing a Quince sweater I just got. It's really, really cozy. It's got a little bit of stretch, which I like, but is super cozy on the arms and neck. And I'm just busted out my Quince jeans, my new Quince jeans. My girlfriend has been hassling me to get new jeans, and these Quince jeans are awesome. Quince has the kind of fall staples you'll want to wear on repeat, like 100% Mongolian cashmere from just $60 and classic fit denim like the kind I am wearing right now. So this fall, layer up with pieces that feel as good as they look. Go to quince.com/gabfest for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/gabfest. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/gabfest. This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. And Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. Even Slate's president, Charlie Kammerer, is using Mint Mobile. And Charlie says more people should be trying it out. It was really easy for him to switch providers. The SIM card was shipped to his home. They let him use his existing phone. He didn't have to change his number. Charlie's on the $15 a month deal and is getting unlimited talk and text over their 5G network at literally a fraction of what he was paying with someone else. So ditch overpriced wireless and their jaw-dropping monthly bills, unexpected overages, and hidden fees. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/gabfest. That's mintmobile.com/gabfest. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
This episode is brought to you by Planned Parenthood Federation of America. You've seen the headlines. The Trump administration is attacking sexual and reproductive health care. It's the kind of big, urgent topic that deserves more than just cocktail chatter. But Planned Parenthood Federation of America's commitment to care never stops, no matter what. Planned Parenthood health centers are still here, providing compassionate, affordable, and judgment-free care for everyone. Some lawmakers are trying to end abortion access, slash funding people rely on for care, and shut down Planned Parenthood health centers. These attacks only deepen the healthcare crisis they created, putting millions at risk. But here's the truth. Planned Parenthood has been there for over a century because of supporters like you. With your commitment, they can keep defending the care people need, whether it's birth control, cancer screenings, abortion, gender-affirming care, or sex education. Planned Parenthood believes everyone should have the freedom to make decisions about their own bodies, no matter what, and that's something worth fighting for. When freedoms are at risk, what you do during pivotal moments matters most. Join the fight for health and rights by making a gift to support Planned Parenthood at plannedparenthood.org/defend.
It is TSA's top priority to make sure that you have the most pleasant and efficient airport experience as possible while we keep you safe. However, Democrats in Congress refuse to fund the federal government, and because of this, Many of our operations are impacted, and most of our TSA employees are working without pay. We will continue to do all that we can to avoid delays that will impact your travel. And our hope is that Democrats will soon recognize the importance of opening the government.
The shutdown is dragging into its third week with little movement, at least on the surface. President Trump continues to use his maximalist powers to punish opponents and minimize harm to key constituencies. So, for example, in a dubiously legal move, he'll pay U.S. military service members by repurposing some R&D money from the Pentagon. He'll be able to do that for a bit. Meanwhile, he's cut $28 billion in projects from areas represented by Democrats and basically zero from areas represented by Republicans. And he is moving to fire thousands more federal workers in departments that he doesn't like. There are a bunch of competing timelines here that John's going to talk about. So Americans are going to feel the pain of the shutdown. More Americans are going to feel the pain of the shutdown. More Americans are also going to see a hike in their health care premiums in a few weeks when open enrollment season begins, because the current situation, if the law continues as it is and not as the Democrats would like it to be, is a series of subsidies for Obamacare that have been in effect since COVID are going to vanish, and people's premiums are going to jump a huge amount if they're trying to enroll in any of the Obamacare plans. So, John, what is your assessment of where this shutdown stands and whether anyone seems inclined at this moment to fold?
It stands at the moment like the president is using this, Rahm Emanuel used to say or said during the response to the Great Recession, never let a crisis go to waste. And Donald Trump is using this to get rid of programs he doesn't like, fire people in the federal bureaucracy that he wanted to do earlier, but it wasn't able to do. Now a judge has blocked him for the moment, but the president is taking advantage of it. The negotiations are going nowhere. One very minor modification is just that the subsidies, they end on December 31st, but as you correctly point out, when people are going through open enrollment, the ACA exchanges are already calculating next year's prices, assuming that the subsidies will not be extended. So that means prices could increase, say, 82% in Pennsylvania. And so effectively, the prices are going up now. The only reason I go through this is that one of the claims that Republicans are making is, oh, well, we have time to negotiate this question of subsidies because they don't go up until the end of the year. But effectively, the rubber is meeting the road right now. You mentioned some of the ways in which the president is getting around some of the challenges with government shutdown, finding a way to use money to pay members of the military. One group that I've been particularly focused on that is not getting any help is the American farmer. As we may have mentioned, the Chinese booked no orders for soybean in this last round during the harvest. And China is normally an enormous importer of soybeans. 20% of U.S. agriculture is exported, and farmers have been devastated by not having foreign markets. The president was going to subsidize them, but that subsidy has been slowed both by the government shutdown and by the fact that the administration can't quite get its act together yet on this. Meanwhile, farmers don't have access to agriculture department help to help them get through this difficult period. There's another timeline here that is important. Experts who know about agriculture say that farmers basically need something in the next few weeks because they have to supplement their depressed harvest now, the depressed revenue because of the tariffs, and they got planning to do. And in farming, you can't just turn your planning on and off. So that's another, it's kind of the crisis started because of the tariffs, but it's being exacerbated by the shutdown and then also just administration lack of effort.
John, we've been talking about these kinds of shutdowns really for as long as we've been on the Gabfest, and usually they have a pattern, which is they appear intractable, and then suddenly they're settled by some back channel negotiations that no one was aware of or that people are only marginally aware of. Is that what is going on here? It does feel like there is kind of less good faith, less obvious leaking that this stuff might be happening that might actually signal that there is movement. But is there a possibility that actually there is really action behind the scenes that we'll wake up one Wednesday morning in 6 days and it'll be like, oh, there it is, done?
So as you're quite right, that has been the solution in the past, although the 2018-2019 shutdown went on for a really long time, 35 days in the first Trump administration. And that points to an important difference between this and, say, the 2013 shutdown or the ones during the Clinton Gingrich years, is that Trump is a different president relative to, he's not engaged in the negotiations. He's not that interested in moving heaven and earth to get this solved in a way that he moves heaven and earth for the things that he truly cares about. And also distance between the president and, if you're a Republican leader, the distance, it's hard to find any running room away from the president. And so, your political fortunes are in trouble if you do. There is a little counter pressure. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been basically sounding like a member of the resistance as she criticizes her party for not doing something about these subsidies. And there are a lot of people who live in rural areas who benefit from these subsidies who will be hurt. And, people who are getting hurt by certainly, as I mentioned, the farmers, by the government shutdown, put some pressure. But there doesn't seem to be a real gang of 4 or gang of 6 or gang of 8 or all the things we used to hear that finds a quick solution to this. So at the moment, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But as you quite rightly point out, sometimes these things emerge out of nowhere.
I just wanted to point out that it's entirely possible that the president is breaking some laws in the way that he's dealing with this. So he moved around several $1 billion that were earmarked by Congress for research and development to pay the military. That's likely, or at least plausibly, a violation of this law called the Anti-Deficiency Act, which is the law that says that when Congress says you're supposed to spend money on one thing, that is what you're supposed to spend money on, not another thing. Otherwise, again, what is the point of budget negotiations and agreements if the president can just throw it all up in the air and move these pots of money around? And then, as you already mentioned, there's a judge who has blocked Trump's order to try to fire lots and lots of people. That's another way in which there's a legal challenge here. And, thinking about the military pay and the point you were making about the administration potentially bailing out farmers, every group is sympathetic, has a kind of special pleading they can make. And if you just sort of start picking and choosing your favorites and you don't abide by what have been the laws up until now about how we pay people and how this works, then you can kind of blunt the impact of the shutdown. Then there's less pressure on both sides. But then it continues for everybody else. There's a real problem here. And I just find these shutdowns to be so frustrating. Why is this how we do things to begin with?
It's a great point about the special pleading and the lack of pressure. The only reason I spend a lot of time thinking about the farmers is their condition is wholly created by the president's tariff program. And so it has that extra little piece. One other thing I'd add to your point about breaking the law is that as the president targets $7.6 billion in energy projects in 16 states, 14 of which are Democratic states, as David mentioned earlier. He's basically, they're saying he's embedding a stretch of his power inside of that, which is to say that he's basically killing congressionally mandated money, which is in fact what this fight used to at one point be about, which is we've got to draw a line in the sand because the president is basically blowing off the proper way of doing things, which is Congress appropriates money and then the executive has to spend it. So within the punishment that he's meting out to Democratic areas, he's also stretching this other part of the law.
There's a third law that is obviously being broken by the administration, which is the Hatch Act.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who has created a video which is playing at some American airports but not others, that is grossly political.
Is blaming the Democrats.
Is blaming the Democrats.
And they sent out all those automatic out-of-office messages, emails that federal workers had not put into their own out-of-office message that they were blaming the Democrats. But lo and behold, that was the message that got sent.
It's clearly a Hatch Act violation. But again, it will not be enforced because the president gets to decide whether Hatch Act violations are enforced. And he will choose not to find a violation. I wonder if you guys think, just to linger on this airport thing for a second, because it's so wacky. I'm imagining myself going to an airport and experiencing this. Actually, I'm going to go to the airport on Sunday. I have to go. I think people. I'm not sure this bit is a very useful thing. I don't think people are going to be like, oh, now I'm really angry at the Democrats. They are really responsible for me having to wait 5 extra minutes on this line. I think Republicans just love the commitment to the cause. They love the commitment to the bit. They don't really even care if there's a bit of blowback about it, because the performance is really, Noam's performance is for Trump. It's the maximalist trollishness, the maximum bullying. That's what delights him. And like, if there's some cost, if people like mock it or if people object or get outraged, that's a benefit. They don't really care that it's moved 100 people in 12 states to be somewhat opposed to Republicans or somewhat annoyed by Kristi Noem. It's mostly like they've gotten a lot of attention for something that is spectacular and bullying, which is their specialty.
So we're used to intractable shutdowns. One side says it's one thing, one side says another. You can evaluate the claims. It operates within. Here you can see the way in which Trump, too, there is a extra foot on the gas. So all the things he's doing that we've talked about, Kristi Noem, and this takes place while the foot is on the gas with National Guard troops in Chicago and Portland. Foot is on the gas with Justice Department in indictments of Comey and Letitia James. Foot on the gas with covert operations by the CIA in Venezuela and torpedoing boats. There's like +1 happening all across the administration all this last week.
One final question about this for you, Emily, which is the capacity for blue states, blue cities, citizens in blue states and blue cities to resist what Trump is doing appears at this moment to be quite minimal. The Hudson Tunnel, for example. Okay, well, good. Go ahead and disagree.
To the shutdown.
To the shutdown.
I mean, I was just going to say.
Overall, the capacity of resistance appears low. Like there does not appear to be any kind of organized effort or a real scheme about how do you prevent Trump from defunding a tunnel across the Hudson, which would be incredibly good for all the American economy broadly. It would just be like a real benefit for the nation to have that tunnel be safe, reliable, effective, new. But Trump is willing to torpedo it, as he is willing to torpedo ships in the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea.
Okay, I don't know what I think about that analogy. And also, I don't have an answer to the tunnel question. There is a protest this weekend, No King's Day. People are coming out and organizing. And I think that, turnout is actually going to matter for that in terms of the message it sends. And also in cities, I've been pretty riveted by the images coming out of Chicago and Portland and other cities. And I think it is very difficult to figure out how to confront in a productive manner masked ICE agents who are snatching people up off the streets. But I mean, I feel like we're seeing some pretty brave examples of Americans trying to do that, trying to stand up for undocumented people who are here, for legal residents who are here, who are getting questioned or also detained. So I don't know. To me, it does not feel low. It feels kind of simmering.
The fact that people have not taken the bait in Chicago or Portland is also notable, since taking the bait is kind of part of what a lot of this is about, and the pre-positioning from Republican leaders about what the No Kings March is going to be attempts to frame any mild bait taking as, pro-Hamas acts of Antifa. In Chicago, even though there have been clashes, when you look at the video, it's basically people getting smashed to the ground by masked agents. It's not burning buildings and that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Cornbread Hemp. Some days winding down can feel impossible, and after a long week, the idea of a hangover is not so appealing. So if you're looking for a healthier way to enjoy happy hour, check out Cornbread Hemp's THC gummies. Cornbread Hemp produces America's first and only USDA organic THC gummy. They're perfect for unwinding, kicking back, and enjoying a chill night with friends without alcohol or the hangover. And all Cornbread Hemp products are third-party lab tested for safety and purity, and they're made with real THC and organic ingredients. Plus, they ship directly to your door. So if you need more chill than thrill, head over to cornbreadhemp.com to order today. Right now, Gabfest listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/Gabfest and use code GABFEST at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/Gabfest, code GABFEST. Cornbread Hemp. This is the good life. This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Upwork. Scaling up your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts who are ready to help you take your business to the next level. With more than 2 decades of experience, Upwork has a simple and ambitious goal: to pioneer a better way of working. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way they staff key projects and initiatives by accessing a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web dev, AI, design, admin support, marketing, and more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them to take your business to the next level. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen. Emily, tell us about the Voting Rights Act case the Supreme Court heard arguments in this week and how it is going to topple the last standing pillar of the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, this is a case that is ostensibly about the state of Louisiana and whether it should have 1 or 2 out of 6 congressional seats that its major minority population, Black people, have a decent shot of getting a representative of their choice elected to, right? At the moment, 2 seats out of 6 are districted to allow Black voters to have a likely chance of getting the candidate of their choice elected, and they're 30% of the population in Louisiana, so that's proportionate. But the Republicans in control of the state have wanted it to be only 1 instead of 2 out of 6. And so that's the fight that's taking place over the map. But what's really going on here is the Supreme Court asked for arguments about whether the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, collides with the protections for minority voters in the Voting Rights Act. In other words, will the court adopt a definition of formal equality that means that you can't take race into account in districting? And, you know, there's a certain, I suppose, formalistic appeal to that idea, but we are talking about the Voting Rights Act, which, yes, originally passed in the 1960s, but which Congress last renewed in 2006 by overwhelming majorities. It was unanimous in the Senate. There were something like 33 House members who voted against it. This is what Congress said only 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago, should be the law. And so a lot of argument yesterday is conservative justices questioning whether considering race in districting has gone on too long, like whether this is just supposed to be over. And this is a standard the court invented in the Shelby County decision in 2013, which was taking a big bite out of another part of the Voting Rights Act. And it's just kind of, I know this, like, at this point sounds sort of naive, but it is kind of amazing to see these conservative justices who are supposed to be so textualist and who as a group in the past have complained about activism take this stance that they get to decide, not Congress, that the Voting Rights Act has gone on too long. You know, judicial activism, the classic definition of it is when 9 people or a small group of judges in black robes overturns the work of the democratic process in the legislature. And that is exactly what this is. in that sense, it's also different from other race-conscious programs like affirmative action, right? Affirmative action was the Supreme Court allowed that to go forward in the 1970s and 80s and then pulled back on it. But this is a law. This is a statute, the Voting Rights Act that we have from Congress that sets the standard about considering race in districting. I'm going to say one more thing, though I realize I'm starting to rant, which is that we don't have any protection against political gerrymandering, right? The court has ended that. And so this idea that courts are going to scrutinize whether legislatures create districts on the basis of race is the only way of thinking about having any control over how these lines are drawn.
There is something so weird about the idea that these two forms of gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering, one is considered anathema because of some sense that it goes against a colorblind notion that is not actually in the 14th and 15th Amendments. And the other is okay, even though the other one is the evidence that it is bad for democracy, that it reduces representation and competition, it reduces participation is so profound. And it's also the only one. The problem with partisan gerrymandering is that it cannot be fixed by democracy. Democracy, because it distorts democracy and it gives the entrenched people in power every interest to maintain it. It is unfixable by the actual people who are the legislators who benefit from it. And so the only way it can actually be fixed is by some other branch declaring it null and void, intervening in it. And so the Supreme Court actually could fix partisan gerrymandering, but they won't do it. Whereas they shouldn't be fixing racial gerrymandering in the sense that Congress has acted to legalize it.
Emily, when you say, these are judges deciding whether or not the Voting Rights Act should exist or not, despite what Congress said just 20 years ago, is the specific thing that they are deciding essentially that the protections are outdated? In other words, it was okay to take race into account at one point in American history, but that period is past? Or are they saying it was wrongly considered from the start?
No, they're saying that time has passed. I mean, so in Shelby County, there's this line from Chief Justice Roberts, who wrote the majority opinion, where he just says, things have changed. In other words, the South is not racist the way it used to be. And it's also tied up in this idea that in Shelby County, what was at issue was the idea that the Justice Department had to pre-clear changes to voting practices, including districting, but other stuff too, like closing polling places that only certain parts of the country were doing, right? This was based on where registration was very, very low for Black voters in the 1960s. And so what the court was saying then was that was based on this old history in which there was this kind of race discrimination operating in the South that kept African-American voting incredibly low, which truly was 2% in states like Alabama and Mississippi, right? This is very real, visceral history from not that long ago. And Roberts was we've moved on from that. That's not the country we live in anymore. Now Black people are registered to vote. We don't need this. Okay. Now, in this case, yesterday at oral argument, Justice Kavanaugh is saying, well, he's accepting as a given, as an obvious premise. Well, we all know that there can't be an endless time horizon for race-conscious remedies in the law. And now we have to decide whether this one has just gone on too long. Why?
But I don't, why is that wrong? Why is that a stupid question to say? Why is that a stupid point to make?
Because the people close to the people, which is to say the legislators, are the ones who have the fingertip feel about whether, in fact, we are now in a colorblind society. They live in those places. They can make that judgment. They can stand up and assert it and then be subject to the response by the voters, as opposed to 9 judges.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, I do think when it comes to decisions that are based on race, that there's a really high bar to meet. Legislatively, we allowed all kinds of racism. Congress allowed all kinds of racism to exist for generations in this country, and the Supreme Court sort of systematically during the Civil Rights era knocked a lot of that down. Now, I find this reversal kind of weird, but there is a long history of the Supreme Court saying racial action by the legislature is not okay. Even if it's the law, it's not okay.
In this case, are they saying it's not okay, or are they saying it exists on a spectrum. It was not okay. It was bad at one point, and it's now gotten good, or however you want to choose to describe it. The thing that they're determining is something for which, in the democratic system, they may not have the calipers to gauge. I'm kind of riffing here,
but they're not saying it was never allowed.
But they're also saying the legislature may not have the calipers to gauge it. That the legislatures that constantly fail at this, and they failed for centuries. The legislature of the United States for centuries, or for 150 years, whatever, until the 1960s, allowed racist laws to be in place, which the Supreme Court took away.
So when the legislature then tries to address that with the Voting Rights Act and renews that in 2006, why is it that now the court kind of has religion? Oh no, you're not allowed to do this anymore. We are going to decide the time horizon for this at the moment when, I wonder who's going to benefit from this change. I mean, we're talking about 12 to 15 congressional seats that are currently held by Black Democrats that could just get wiped off of the map. And that is important, right? When you think about the who benefits part of this, the Supreme Court's interest in how they are currently analyzing race-conscious legislation, it's part of the story.
It is part of the story, but I also think I don't think you have to be a kind of racist Republican partisan to look at how the lines are drawn in southern states and the way in which race has become there's just this Democratic Party is the Black people party, and you get 2 seats, and everybody else, we get the white Republicans get everything else, and we're going to draw a line so that people are contained in districts that just represent them based on their race. That's it's an ugly thing. And I find it ugly as someone who understands where it's coming from, but it's ugly. And you don't want to live in a world where that is how we draw lines in this country. No, I don't want to live in a world where we draw lines based on what party you're in either. And the Supreme Court has allowed that. But I don't think it's that doesn't, to me, somehow then make the racial gerrymandering appealing. It just means
the question is not whether it needs remedy. The question is which is the body that is in the best position to do the remedy.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's really important to keep coming back to. I mean, the other thing, David, maybe you'll find this unsatisfying, but the standard in the law is not like Black voters get to elect Black politician. It's minority voters, when they're concentrated in a compact enough shared community of interest, should be as able as they have been to elect the candidate of their choice, to have a meaningful voice and political representation in their state. And remember, if depending on how broad this ruling is, it could affect not just congressional races, but also lots of state and local races. And so you're talking about 2 effects. You're talking about potentially wiping out a lot of Black representation, like Black politicians who have been elected to these seats and Latino politicians in other places. You're also talking about wiping out Democrats. And I think one thing you're getting at with the good points you're making is the awkwardness of how we are addressing the political gerrymandering through racial gerrymandering. And, maybe starting from scratch, there would be a better way to do this now than the kind of Voting Rights Act as it has come down to us through decades of twists and turns of judicial interpretation in these cases. But the net effect of the Supreme Court gutting this part, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, is going to be a shift in political power toward Republicans and toward white people at a moment in which there is obviously a lot on the line for the country in the makeup of Congress, the composition of Congress, the 2026 midterms, 28. It's not clear this decision will come out in time for all the legislatures to run around and redraw their districts in time for the November 26 election, but it's not out of the question either. So I just feel like those real world impacts are really important to keep in mind.
Basically, what Emily's saying is that the analysis of a dozen or so, or maybe more, Democratic seats, which is to say seats that are now held by Democrats, if the Voting Rights Act essentially goes away or remains only in a mildly fibrillating vestigial form, that essentially Republican legislatures would crack these districts that have representation that ends up electing Democrats and dilute the power of the Democratic vote using partisan gerrymandering, and basically turn 12 or more districts that are now controlled by Democrats into ones that would be highly favorable to Republican candidates. And that would as Emily said, it's very much up in the air whether it would exist in this midterm. If it did, that would go a way towards, plus what's happening in Texas and Missouri and North Carolina, towards helping Republicans overcome the traditional historical advantage that the out party has in non-presidential years.
So let's go to cocktail chatter. The goal of a cocktail, I suppose, is to get yourself into a mildly fibrillating vestigial form. That is the aim of any cocktail. So, John Dickerson, what cocktail is going to put you in that form, and what are you going to be chattering about?
Well, it's just gin at the end of a fire hose, really. What I am catching up to, something that Jason Furman, friend of the Gabfest, economist at Harvard, figured out, and that Matt Iglesias put in Slow Boring recently, which is that 92% of GDP growth in the first half of this year came from artificial intelligence data centers and information processing equipment, which is to say that basically the economic growth, that's not a share of GDP, that's share of the growth that took place, is all basically happening as a result of this highly speculative, crazy deal making that's going on in the artificial intelligence related investment space, as they say. And this, I was lucky enough to interview Andrew Ross Sorkin about his book 1929 at the 92nd Street Y, and so we were in the talking about bubbles and stock market crashes and shocks through the economy, which he's also written about the Great Recession. And man, when you read these stories about the investments that's taking place in AI, and then that figure really struck me as the AI bubble being something that, my list of things to worry about is slightly moving up.
Yep. Ebaz, what are you going to fibrillate about?
I was moved this week by an act of solidarity among our fellow journalists. We have not talked on the show about Pete Hegseth's orders to journalists who cover the Pentagon to not do all kinds of things that are just like journalism, right? I mean, this was way beyond, you can't disclose classified information, into you can't disclose basically anything we don't like. It's just, these rules from the Pentagon about being in the building were just completely inconsistent with actually being a reporter following facts where they lead. And so it was moving to me to see almost every journalist who covers the Pentagon, including, conservative outlets like Fox and Newsmax, turn in their credentials. Apparently, they're just not going to be allowed into the building. I guess Hegseth will use whatever remaining outlets are left to disseminate his propaganda, and everybody else will keep doing their reporting from somewhere else. And I'm sure keep doing their jobs, which is to disclose information, to keep the public informed about what is happening in our Defense Department, or our Department of War, as Trump has renamed it. And it's hard for journalists to take collective action, right? Because we're supposed to compete with each other. But in this case, I think it was really important that all these outlets took a stand.
This does not feel like it's going to go well, because the reason people leak does not have to do with proximity.
Exactly.
People in the military in particular, when they are being led by a leadership that engages in this kind of behavior, look for outlets to tell information to. And this just seems like a kind of canary in the coal mine of a problem. Plus, given the Secretary of Defense's use of the Signal messaging app, it turns out you can just get battle plans texted right to you.
Phew. I need some battle plans texted to me. Although even when I text you on Signal, John, sometimes you don't respond. You don't even when I send you a battle plan.
I texted you on Signal, David, the other day, and you never responded. I believe.
Neither of you, then neither of us, I should say, are then in any way equipped to be the Secretary of Defense, in that we...
Yes. We have neither battle plans nor responsiveness. My chatter is about a wonderful little feature in The Atlantic this week, the 65 essential children's books.
Yay!
The Atlantic went and made a list of books since 1939 that are great, essential, and it's just a super duper list. It's a super list. Of course, it has Where the Wild Things Are, Cars and Trucks and Things That Go by Richard Scarry, Goodnight Gorilla, A Baby Sister for Francis, Goodnight Moon, Harold and the Purple Crayon, Green Eggs and Ham is the only Dr. Seuss. Everybody only gets one book. Mike Mulligan and his Steam Shovel, Blueberries for Sal, Very Hungry Caterpillar, And to me, maybe the great work of literature of the 20th century, Frog and Toad Are Friends, which is just like a incredible book, not just an incredible children's book, but an incredible book of any kind. So really check it out. It's a great list. It's got lots of fun stuff, and it will surely bring a smile to your face. And it's interesting because, of course, like we have not had children who are reading little kids' books for 10, 15 years, and so there's all the books for the last dozen years, which I didn't know, and it was fun to look at them too. Listeners, please keep your chatter coming. Email them to us at gabfest@slate.com. Something that you're chattering about. And our listener chatter this week was inspired by, I think, our own chatter. It's from Ashley Kendi in Wilmington, Delaware, and it's amazing.
In a recent cocktail chatter, you raised an interesting question. Who was Carol Brady's first husband? The 1996 movie A Very Brady Sequel settles this question by revealing that Carol's first husband, Roy, was a professor who took an ill-fated cruise on a vessel called the Minnow. Yep, her husband wound up on Gilligan's Island with the skipper, the millionaire, the movie star, and the rest. I'm not sure if this qualifies as Brady Bunch canon, but it's a reference I always got a kick out of. Love the Gabfest, longtime listener. Can't believe my first listener chatter is about Gilligan's Island.
What? No.
And she bolted. He disappeared for a little while, and she was hot out the door with the architect.
And whose genius idea was it to make her former husband the professor on Gilligan's Island? That's some serious Love Boat action of crossing different TV show storylines.
Right. It's exactly that. It's like when the Harlem Globetrotters showed up in Scooby-Doo. I mean,
didn't the Harlem Globetrotters also show up either on Love Boat or on the Brady Bunch? I think they did.
I'm sure.
It's very, very controversial. That's all for our episode this week. We also have a bonus episode in your feed. The movie that people can't stop talking about. Black Phone 2. No, the movie people can't stop talking about, One Battle After Another. That, however, is only for Slate Plus members who also get lots of other things like discounts to our live shows, such as our live shows that are coming up. And they never hit the paywall on the Slate site, and they get to come to our cocktail party. So if you are a member, thank you. If you're not a member, subscribe to Slate Plus directly from the Political Gabfest show page on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit slate.com/Gabfest Plus to get access wherever you listen. That's our show for today. The Gabfest is produced by Nina Porzucki. Our researcher is Emily Ditto. Our theme music is by They Might Be Giants. Ben Richmond is Senior Director for Podcast Operations. Mila Bell is Executive Producer of Slate Podcasts. And Hillary Fry is the Editor-in-Chief of Slate. For Emily Bazelon and John Dickerson, I'm David Plotz. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Come join us in Chicago in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.